third group, we would like to explain about risk and return. My name is Miss P.
And my name is Nabila. And my name is Tita.
Okay guys, so I will explain about risk and return definition. Basically, risk is variability between expected and actual return. While about return is income received on an investment plus any change in market price, usually expressed as a percent of the beginning market price of investment. The second one, all investment carry risk. However, the level of risk varies depending on the type of investment. Generally, investment considered to carry higher levels. The risk is divided into two: systematic risk and unsystematic risk. Systematic risk is usually come from external factors, which is economic crisis, political instability, change in tax laws. So about unsystematic risk, it's all about natural disaster, foreign policies, or maybe something that we not expect happen. So it called unsystematic risk. It is very important for us how to manage our risk. First is by reducing risk. The second is transferring risk, and the third, controlling risk, and the next is funding risk. First, minimizing risk. Minimizing risk is about how to minimize our risk and how to make it not become large beyond the company. While about transfer risk is about diverting risk to elsewhere. Example, like we avoiding risk and focus on the important one. And about the third one, it's about carrying out the risk and anticipating policies, such as installing alarm when have some emergency, or maybe police alarm when we have something like danger time. And the last is about funding risk. It's about providing a reserve fund to anticipate future risk. Next, about risk reverse. Different people react to risk in different way. First is risk averse. Risk averse is about the attitude toward risk, in which investors require an increased return as compensation in increased risk. The second one, risk neutral. Risk neutral is about the attitude toward risk that whatever the investor choose, with the higher return that regardless investor risk. The third is risk seeking. It's about the attitude that investor choose, that which investor prefer. Even if they have a lower return, they don't have any problem about it. Risk of single asset, risk assessment. Example, Norman Company wants to choose the better of two investments, A and B. Each requires an initial outlay of $10,000, and each has a most likely annual rate of return of 15%. Management has estimated the returns associated with each investment. Asset A appears to be less risky than asset B. The risk-averse decision maker would prefer asset A over asset B, because A offers the same most likely return with a lower range or risk. And then the next is probability distribution. These bar charts explain about the table 8.2 before. This table is explain about probability of occurrence. Return asset A is more appears to be less risky than asset B. A list of all the possible outcomes of a random variable along with their corresponding probability values. This is the formula for return measurement for a single asset as expected return. The most common statistical indicator of an asset risk is standard deviation, or sigma k, which measures the dispersion around the expected value. The expected value of a return, R bar, is the most likely return of an asset.
Risk and portfolio. In real-world situation, the risk of any single investment will not be viewed independently of other assets. New investment must be considered in light of their impact on the risk and return of an asset over an investor's portfolio of assets. The financial manager's goal is to create an efficient portfolio, one that provides the maximum return for a given level of risk. So, a vision portfolio is a portfolio that maximizes return for a given level of risk. The main point in the risk profile is how committed you are to minimizing risk, and portfolio will determine the return you want to be optimal. A portfolio can simply be called a collection of investment assets, such as property, deposits, and shares. Now, for part A, portfolio return and standard deviation. The return on a portfolio is a weighted average of the return on the individual asset from which it's formed, where WI equals the proportion of the portfolio's total dollar value represented by asset I, and then RY equal return on asset I. Now let's take a look to the table 8.6, expected return, expected value, and standard deviation of returns for portfolio XY. Expected portfolio returns for the year start from 2014 until 2018. Forecasted return by asset X and asset Y. And so how to calculate portfolio return? We know in here 50% is for each year, so just 50% times by 8%, 8% is by asset X, plus 50% times 60%, 16% is by asset Y, and the result is 12%. So etc. for the next year until 2018, the result is 12%. For the part B, expected value of portfolio returns, we calculate the average within 5 years, so just 12% plus 12%, 12% until 5 times, and divide it by 5, and the result is 12%. And for the C, standard deviation of expected portfolio returns, you can see the formula by the previous page, and just calculate this substitute to the formula, and the result is 0%. Okay, now we continue to table 8.7. Let's take a look about forecasted returns, expected value, and standard deviation for asset X, Y, and Z, and portfolios XY and XZ. Within 5 years, we start from 2014 until 2018. They are asset X, asset Y, and asset Z. And how to calculate is still the same way with the previous example on table 8.6. Within 50% each year. So how to find XY portfolio is 50% of asset X plus 50% of asset Y. And how to calculate asset exit is, and how to calculate exit portfolios is 50% of asset X plus 50% of asset Z, and so like that, etc. So the expected value is 12% and the standard deviation is 3.16%. So next to the part B, correlation. Correlation is statistical measure of the relationship between any two series of numbers. If two series tend to vary in the same direction, they are positively correlated. If the series vary in opposite direction, they are negatively correlated. The degree of correlation is measured by the correlation coefficient, which range from +1 for perfectly positively correlated series to -1 for perfectly negatively correlated series. So next to the part C, diversification. The concept of correlation is essential to developing an efficient portfolio to reduce overall. It's best to diversify by combining or adding to the portfolio. Assets that have the lowest possible correlation with each other can reduce the overall variability of portfolio returns. And then part D, correlation, diversification, risk, and return. In general, the lower the correlation between asset return, the greater the risk reduction that investor can achieve by diversifying. And then part E, internal diversification. The attempt to reduce risk by investing in more than one nation, by diversifying across nations whose economic cycles are not perfectly correlated, investors can typically reduce the variability of their returns. They are returns from international diversification. Over long periods, internationally diversified portfolios tend to perform better, meaning that they are higher returns relative to the risk taken than purely domestic portfolio. Risk of international diversification. In addition to the risk induced by currency fluctuation, several other financial risks are unique to international investing. Most important is political risk.
So, in this section, we want to quantify the relationship between risk and returns, and we want to measure how much additional return an investor should be expect from taking a little extra risk. And the classic theory that links risk and returns for all assets is capital assets pricing model, or CAPM in a short. CAPM means for an investor. CAPM usually used to understand how the investor behaves as a whole, to understand how the mechanism of price formation and market returns in simple form, and to understand how to determine the risks that are relevant to an asset, and also to understand the relationship between risk and expected return for an asset when the market is in a balanced condition. Well, in this section, we would like to solve the case using the beta coefficient non-diversifiable risk capital assets pricing model formula. And the formula is Ri equal to Rf plus beta I times to Rm minus Rf, where Ri is required return on asset, Rf is risk-free rate of return, the beta I is beta coefficient, and Rm is market returns. So, after we have seen the case of the Benjamin Corporation, we can conclude that the beta on asset Z is 1.5, Rf is 7%, and Rm is 11%. And after we got the data, we input this data into the formula of CAPM. So, return on asset Z equal to 7% plus 1.5 times to 11% minus 7% is 13%. So that's the result of CAPM. And in this case, the market risk premium is 4%. And then the risk premium is 6%. What is security market line, or SML? That is the definition of the capital assets pricing model or CAPM as a graph that reflects the required returns in the marketplace for each level of non-diversifiable risk. So this is the security market line example, the depiction of the capital assets pricing model or CAPM as a graph. And still we continue about Benjamin Corporation's asset Z, and the risk as measured by beta, and all of beta is plotted on the x-axis, and the required returns are plotted on the y-axis. And as data shown, beta on asset Z was 1.5 and beta market was 1, and on this SML there is a beta RF. Beta RF is the beta associated with the risk-free assets. Beta RF would equal to 0. And in the preceding example for Benjamin Corporation, RF was 7%, right? NRM was 11%, and then the return on asset Z, as we have to compute, and the result was 13%, and the line always will be a straight line. That's the SML. The characteristic of security market line. Security market line is a good representation in investment opportunity cost, which provides the combination of risk-free asset and the market portfolio. The slope of the SML is determined by market risk premium, and all the assets which are correctly priced are represented on the security market line. The assets which are above the SML are undervalued as they give the higher expected return for a given amount of risk, and the assets which are below the security market line are overvalued as they have lower expected returns for the same amount of the risk.